Hello guys, welcome back. So on today's episode we're going to talk about the News 2. So how to plot on the News 2 chart and the interpretation of the News 2 and some other things you need to know. So if you've been following through, we've done the ATE assessment using the News 2 and we're just kind of updating it and progressing towards what the News 2 chat is. So welcome back, like, subscribe, follow and share this channel to get more updates about the OSCE and boost your self-confidence. Okay, so probably we've heard of News 2. So what is News 2? Normally we say the News 2 is a mnemonic. It means the National Early Warning Signs Score. It's 2 because we used to have a News 1, so it's more like an updated version, so that's the 2. So what it means is that it's just a paper or a chart. I've uploaded it up there. It's just a paper or a chart that you have to follow, that normally hospitals in England or hospitals in the United Kingdom follow to be able to assess the physiological observation of a patient and to be able to know how often to monitor a patient, and if the patient needs to be escalation needs to be done for a patient. Escalation means if you have to tell any medical team, any surgical team to review the patient immediately, or as and when they should review the patient. So it's all about checking your patient vital signs or observation, plotting it on the chart for it to so it has parameters and it has some ranges that is going to give you the range and the parameter, and they've been able to come up with a score that predicts that the patient is deteriorating or the patient is improving. So it's something that actually helps us to know whether our patient is deteriorating or our patient is actually improving. So we're going to delve deep into it. How would we know if our patient is deteriorating? How would we know if our patient is improving? Basically, as nurses, we already know some of the parameters of the vital signs that we have to look out for, and which ones denotes that or depicts that the patient's condition is deteriorating. However, they've made it quite simple in the sense that probably if you don't have those parameters of head, or probably because we've got different types of patients with different underlying conditions, they've made the News 2 quite easier for us to be able to know which parameters to actually look out for. So it's just each of the components of the vital signs listed there with the parameters there that can show us if this patient is actually sliding into deterioration or the patient is getting better. So let's just get to it. So it has actually been endorsed by the NHS England, and it is acceptable to use. It is one that is supposed to be used everywhere. So in the OSCE, normally plotting on the News 2 or even in the clinical setting, you have to use a green pen. So the green pen is used to plot the News 2. It contains the dates, your patient's details, like the patient's name, date of birth, date of admission, and the date of time that you're supposed to do. So each place has a column and it's actually color coded. So we've got a white, we've got an amber or a yellow, and we've got a red. So the white actually depicts that your patient is within the zone that is safe, and your patient is actually not deteriorating and the patient's observations are okay, whilst the amber is kind of prompting you that the patient is actually sliding into deterioration or the patient's condition is not actually improving. And then when it gets into the red, it means that your patient has actually entered into a deteriorated zone. So you need to be more mindful of this. So the same goes for the fact that if your patient started from a red and comes to an amber, it means that the patient is actually improving. And if the patient moves from an amber to a white, it means that the patient's condition has actually improved. So we have a News 2 chart on the screen. So we're going to look at what it actually means. So on our screen, we have a part that says the News key, where we have the 0 being the grey or shaded part, we have the 1 being the yellow, we have the 2 being the amber, and we have the 3 being the red. And then on the other side on the right, we've got the full name. Below that, we've got the date of birth, date of admission. So you put your patient's details there. And then we've got the date and then the time. So it goes into the box. Now, one fact you have to know about the date and time is that the date should be the day you are actually doing the task you're doing. So for example, if you've been given a question paper, I've always said we should pay attention to the question paper. They might write beneath it, assume the day is today at this. So I've uploaded the question paper to show you what I'm talking about. So that is the time you are actually going to use to plot your news, not the time you are actually writing. So let's say if it is 11 a.m. and you're doing the exam at 11 a.m. but the paper says that assume it is today at 1700, the time you're going to write on the news to chat is 1700 today and not the time you were actually doing the examination. Also, what we have to know is that we deal in I think they use the 24-hour clock in the UK. So we have from 000 to 2300, and just that's the 100. So like we have got 000, we've got 1, we've got 2, we've got 3, we've got 4, 5, 6. So the single digit actually denotes AM, that's the morning, and then the double, like let's say when it comes to 12 o'clock, you just keep adding the single digit. So if it is 1 o'clock or 1 p.m., you just add the 1 to 12 o'clock and it's 1300. So if it's 2, you add 2 to 12 and it's 1400, 1500, 1600, 1700. That denotes the p.m. So we have to be mindful of the times. Now, if you've been told that assume it is today at 1730 or 1700, just write the 1700 there, because if you think that, okay, I know 1700 is 5 o'clock, so I'm going to write 5 o'clock. Here, basically, it is known that 5 o'clock is in the morning, except you are adding the PM to it, like 5 p.m. Then you are showing that you are actually talking about PM and not AM. However, if you just write 0500, then it is morning and you're not talking about the afternoon or the evening. So be mindful of it. If the time says 1700, please write 1700. You know that you're talking about PM. If you think that you cannot write 1700 and you're going to write 0500 or 5 o'clock, please put the PM. But because the space is not much, do not sophisticate yourself, just put the time as it says. All right, so let's go on. So when we look at the first part, we've got respiration, that's counting the breaths per minute. So we've got parameters from less than or equal to 8 till less than greater than or equal to 25. So the boxes are there. It denotes where you should plot. So we've got a part that says 9 to 11, 12 to 14, 15 to 17, and 18 to 20 going. So what it means is that after you've checked your patient's parameters, whatever you got, you plot it within the box that the figures are showing, like close to the figures, the box that denotes that this is what you're trying to say. For example, if we get a respiration of 17, we look through the respiration bit and see where the 17 falls. So we have a part that says 15 to 17, and then we plot a dot at that place. You make the dot visible. So you plot it at where it says 15 to 17 because you got 17. And then again as well, make sure you're plotting it within the column where you have written the date and the time, where you are actually plotting the date and the time. So do not go and plot on the other part or anything. Just stay within the column where you are actually doing it. And then again, so we've got two parts. We've got part on the left, we've got part on the right. Do not go to the part on the left. Stick to the part. Don't go to the part on the right. Sorry, stick to the part on the left. So starting from the left to the right. So it means that it has made provisions for the time. It's just made provisions. It's been divided with the numbers just so if you plot on the other side, you can still see what score it is and all that. But do not get confused. It's just this way. So it's going that way. So if you're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it's going that way. So just stick to starting from the left onwards. And so if you're given, say, 12 to 14, so if you've given a respiration of 13, you look between the boxes, you look between the numbers, the parameters that have been given, where is the 13, and then you plot. So it falls between 12 to 14, you look at the box and then you plot. Remember, do not plot 2 respirations at one place. If you're done with one column and you're doing it again, go on the next column, go to the next column, and then plot it there. Now, there is something that we are supposed to note when we are plotting on the news. So some people write the value after they've dotted, others to just dot. My advice is that if you want to write the actual figure there, the appropriate way or the reason why you should dot or you should write the number there is, for example, you see where it's in the white, because the patient is not in danger, there is no need for you to actually write the figure as the patient is actually safe. So you could just plot to show that it is between this range. However, let's say for a part where it says 21 to 24. Now, for the respiration, 21 to 24 is scoring a 2. And we have, so the nearest number to 21 is the 20. So we've got 18 to 20, 21 to 24. So 21 to 24 means a 2. So if you get within 21 to 24, so any figure you get that is colored, that falls within the amber, the yellow, or the red, you can write the figure down whilst you've still dotted. This is because you are giving whoever takes it, or whoever is coming to review the patient, or whoever is continuing the care, an idea of why the patient is scoring, the figure the patient got that is scoring, and will be able to know when next the patient gets another figure, if the patient is going forward or the patient is coming down. So for example, if patient had 21 and I just dot it there, and again the patient has 24 the next time and I just dot it there, me being a doctor or someone else being the doctor to review, or your next colleague that took up from you reviewing it, might not necessarily know that the patient is actually deteriorating. They might think, oh, the score is just a 2 and it has been a 2 since, and so it's nothing to worry about. However, if the patient is scoring within that column, like scoring means that the patient actually has a figure other than 0. So if the patient is scoring and then we put it there as say 21, you put the dots there and write 21. When next the patient scores, or when next the patient gets maybe 23, and then I dot and I put 23, I have a fair idea, or anybody that picks the news 2 chart has a fair idea that patient has moved from 21 to 23 and is actually moving towards the zone that is dangerous or is deteriorating. So an eye needs to be kept or something needs to be done. So in that instance, I advise that you write the figure there. Or for example, if the patient's respiration is a 20, you know that 20 is close to 21, and from 20, if the patient goes any higher, the patient is entering into a 2. So if you put the dots there, you could write the 20. That's the figure closest or nearest to the next figure that will make the patient score. You can write that one down as a prompt to show that this patient is actually at the limit, or is actually where, when next the patient goes a bit higher, or if care is not taken, the patient could actually deteriorate or enter into the colored sections. So in that instance, that is when we can write it down. But if the patient is in the white and it has no problem at all within the normal ranges, just continue dotting. There is no need, you can write, but there's actually no need to write the figure down, except the patient is in the colored section, the yellow, the amber, the red, or the patient is at the border, the white, the border, where even if one more is added, patient is going to go into the colored section. That is when you write the figure down as well as dot it down. So we're done with the respiration. We've seen what it is, so we know where it means that the patient is deteriorating. We know the ranges we are looking for. So if you get a particular figure where you are going to document, now we come to the next one below, and that is SpO2. It says SpO2 scale 1, which is the oxygen saturation. So we've got from 91 to 96. So we've got a part that says that greater than or less than or equal to 91. up to greater than and less or equal to 96. So if your patient is scoring any of them, you look between the ranges, which boxes it falls in, and you actually plot on it. Now, if you've watched my previous videos, you'd see that we've got something called scale 1 and we've got something called scale 2. Scale 2 is normally used for patients that have respiratory conditions or lung conditions like COPD, asthma, bronchiectasis, atelectasis, all those conditions. And because they have a different mechanism, they have an underlying condition. Some of them have parameters between 88 to 92, which I have said before, that's a scale 2, that is acceptable. So if the patient is actually, whether on oxygen or not on oxygen, is reading SpO2 is reading 88 to 92, it is accepted and it is termed as normal. However, if your patient is not a scale 2 patient, and the scale 2 can only be determined by a doctor, after the doctor has seen the patient, the doctor can say, okay, put this patient on scale 2, or by the nurse's discretion, if you think that your patient needs to be a scale 2 because they've got an underlying condition of COPD and whatever you're doing, the SpO2 is not going up, you can escalate to a doctor that this is what you have seen, and the doctor can actually put the command in place. However, let's stick to the scale 1. So with the scale 1, what's happening is that anything below 95, anything 95 and below would score, because a patient without any underlying conditions, SpO2 is supposed to be 96 and above. So if you get any of them, your patient is actually, any of them below 96, your patient is actually going to score. So 96 and above is going to be a 0, which is it shows there. So whatever you see, but remember in OSCE actually, you're not going to be tied to be given a scale 2 patient. So our focus would be only on the scale 1. Do not even look at the scale 2 at all. Do not cross to go there at all. Don't let your focus go there. Stick to the scale 1, because it's rare. It's under no circumstance, or let's say no instances, would you be given a patient that is on scale 2. Yours is to stick with the scale 1. So do not go there. I'm only explaining it so we have a fair idea of what it means, because you might see scale 2 and you'd see different things on O2, you'd get confused. That is also a part, it's for oxygen, however, oxygen saturation. However, it is for certain patients that actually have respiratory conditions, that are oxygen retainers, that have a lot of conditions, but that is not where our focus should be. Our focus should be on the scale 1, actually, because that's what normally comes in exams. So scale 1, that is where you are going to plot. Please avoid scale 2. So scale 2 column. So the scale 1 actually, so it gives us a fair idea. So anything less than 96 means that our patient is scoring. So whatever we actually plot there. Then let's skip scale 2 as I said, and then we come to the next one, which is air or oxygen. So we have what says A is equal to air, O2 liters per minute with the units there, and then we've got divide. So what it means is that, let's say you were doing scale 1, like we've plotted on the scale 1, our patient had 96% of oxygen saturation, had scored recorded the 96% for oxygen saturation. However, our patient was on oxygen. Say the question says your patient is on oxygen. So when you come to that side, you are telling the assessor, you are telling whoever is taking the paper or whoever is reviewing the patient, whether the oxygen saturation you got for your patient, the patient had it with the help of oxygen, being on oxygen, supplementary oxygen, or whether the patient was had that saturation on room air. So that part is going to give a fair idea of whether your patient requires oxygen, has been on oxygen, or the patient wasn't on oxygen. So let's say if we get a 96 on room air, when we get to where it says air or oxygen, the only thing that we are going to do is to plot A, because the key says A is equal to air. So it's just to put an A, a capital A there, and then we leave it. However, if the 96 or any figure we got denotes that our patient was on oxygen, like the question denotes that our patient was on oxygen, please do not put an A, as the A symbolizes room air. A patient cannot have oxygen saturation both on room air and on oxygen at the same time you are doing the vital signs. I don't know if you get what I mean. Maybe on the next column, patient may not be on oxygen, but you can't record that patient is on oxygen and room air at the same time in one column when you are actually doing the observations at once. So if the patient wasn't on room air but was on oxygen, let's say maybe a liter or 2 liters or 3 liters, depending on the amount of oxygen the patient was on, you put it in the box, that is the amber colored box. So if it is a 2, you put a 2. You do not need to squeeze the liters per minute there because it's going to be long and you might not be able to write. That's why the unit has already been written for you. So you just go ahead to put 2, and anybody that picks it know that you're talking about liters per minute because the unit has been written there for you. So it has been written there, so anybody will know. So do not stress yourself to make your work in. Remember, you're going to be marked for legibility, you're going to be marked for clarity as well, and then a good handwriting. So you don't just have to put a lot of ink and all that. So you are going to put 2 there if your patient is on oxygen, say 2 liters. Now, when you come down, you see the device. So the device is actually telling you what device that the patient is actually, what device you're using to administer the oxygen. So we've got a lot of devices. We've got nasal cannulas, we've got face masks, we've got nasal cannulas or nasal prompts really. We've got face masks, we've got a reservoir mask, we've got venturi, we've got a lot of stuff. But I don't think that we would be stressed during the examination about venturi and all that. However, the simplest ones that we could actually encounter, I believe we could encounter during the exam max or the nasal cannula. So the device, if you think you cannot write everything there, just put an initial. So NC nasal cannula or FM, which is a face mask, you put that there to denote that the patient is on this liters of oxygen via this device. And you are supposed to know the parameters as well, so you don't go make a mistake. So realistically, from 1 liter to 5 liters per minute is actually delivered via nasal cannula. However, 6 to 10, or yes, I think 6 to 10, or maybe delivered via face masks. So that is not going to be our priority. However, it's just to know about it. So if you see anything, so if it's 2 liters nasal cannula and all that, it's just a knowledge to have on hand. Maybe you are asked, maybe sometimes, you know, during the exams there are a lot of things that can happen. Maybe something happens, and just to be able to redeem yourself, you are asked, okay, so you wouldn't be asked, but who knows, maybe you've done something and there is a mistake and the assessor says, okay, so in a case where your patient, you said 2 liters and the patient is using face mask, what do you think is wrong there? If you have this knowledge and you're able to say, they'll just know that probably you are anxious, that's why you couldn't say, but you actually know the answer. So sometimes having this information on hand doesn't only help in exams, but helps in the clinical settings as well. So we are done with the air or oxygen. No, if the patient is on room air, you put capital A at the section where it says air, that's the white section. But if the patient is on oxygen, you put any other thing, and the liters that the patient is on in the device. Now we come to the C, which is the blood pressure. So this part is very dicey. So the C, which is the blood pressure, shows us the range where the patient is going to score, the range where you're going to put. So we've seen that from the ranges of 101 to 219 is not going to score. So we know that normally in a normal clinical setting, if your patient has a blood pressure systolic about 219, that is quite high. So you think, you know, you're supposed to, but according to the news, the patient is not scoring. However, with your clinical judgment, even though the patient is not scoring, that is actually a high blood pressure. So you should be able to acknowledge that, maybe know that that is high. but then it is not scoring. So do not transfer analysis, say, oh, 290, my patient, just stick to the news. If you're using the news, just stick to the news too. So basically, we are seeing that with the blood pressure, the most important part of the blood pressure is the systolic. I'm saying the most important part is the systolic because we may chart a blood pressure. Say we have a patient that has a blood pressure of 100/80, and when we are actually plotting, the 100 is going to be in the yellow column, and the 80 is also going to be in the red column. So what are we going to do? Because the yellow is a 1 and the 80 is a 3, does it mean that the patient is scoring a 4? No. So I'm saying no, and what I'm saying is that we only focus on the systolic. So what I mean we only focus on the systolic is that any score the systolic has is what we are using. So if the diastolic falls within a red, a yellow, it doesn't matter. That parameter there has only been put there for the systolic. It doesn't take account of the diastolic scoring. So it means that it is only when the systolic enters into any of these parameters we are scoring. So if the systolic is within the white score part, it is a 0. It means the overall blood pressure score is a 0, even if the diastolic is in the red. If the systolic is in the yellow, we can score as a 1. If the systolic is in the amber, we can score as a 2. If the systolic is in the red, we can score as a 3. So here we are only focusing on the systolic to score the overall blood pressure. The diastolic should not even be considered at all, regardless of where it is. So if you get 200/100, because 200 is not scoring as a systolic, and even if 100 is scoring, our focus is the systolic. So we are only scoring or rating the systolic blood pressure, please. We are not going to focus on the diastolic. If the diastolic is down, per your clinical judgment, you would escalate and actually do something. But on the news, your systolic is what you are actually going to score. So please do not get confused to put a different score or a combined scores or anything. Just stick to which one is supposed to be, which is the systolic. Just stick to scoring the systolic. Then again, I still have my WhatsApp link in the comment section or in the description. If you're interested in a one-on-one class, we currently have one-on-one classes ongoing and it's going superb. So if you're interested in having a one-on-one class, you can take the WhatsApp link, put it in the WhatsApp but I don't know if the link is clickable, but if it's not clickable, kindly copy it and paste it in WhatsApp, and it will bring you into my general group, and then you can have your inquiries or anything you want to do. If you want to have a one-on-one where I could be performing assessments and other mock trials with you and further explanation, because I can't give everything here, and then we'll go from there. But in the meantime, I hope you understand this, and if you have any question, please drop it in the comment section and I'm going to answer for you. Like, share, subscribe, and follow for more of this. So in our next video, I'm going to actually drop a practical session